you. Okay, so I'm going to talk to us a bit this morning about the service commitment work that we've been doing for the last couple of years. This builds on a presentation I gave to a conference in Canberra earlier this year for the Australian Tertiary Education Management Group. And we were asked to speak there because Zane and I managed to pick up an award last year for this work, and it turned out that the fine print said that if you pick up an award you have to give the keynote presentation at the following year's conference. So there we were. So of course I was delighted to do that, and I'm going to give you a sort of cut down version of it today. Because I think it's helpful for us to reflect on the work that we've done. Many of you have been involved in this in different ways. And most of you will probably know about some of it, but as is often the way, we don't always know everything that there is to know. So I thought a summary might be helpful to frame the work that we're doing today. And we called it Are We There Yet? And you'll kind of see why when we get to the end, I think. So to start with a couple of statements as a bleeding obvious. Our service commitment, we are committed to helping students have the best possible experience at the University of Melbourne. That's our shared service commitment that we developed a couple of years ago, and it's plastered all over the walls and you're all familiar with it. The challenge with that, of course, is that excellent or even good service to students is not a simple proposition, and Andy's touched on this. And good or even excellent service means different things to different people, staff and students, and there are a number of perspectives on that. So we're going to now hear from a few of our staff and students on that very subject, and we'll just roll the film.
For me, I want my staff to be able to answer the question that the student comes to you with in a friendly and helpful and informed manner, but also to be able to dig that little bit deeper and to make sure that the student's getting as much information as we think is necessary or relevant to them.
I think good service is always about consultative service, so recognising who you're actually delivering it for and what their needs are. So for us on campus, obviously our primary users are students, in fact pretty much our only users, so understanding who students are, what they need, and also what kind of time they spend on campus as well. So what do they want out of their campus experience, what are we currently offering, and constantly seeking that feedback.
It also needs to be a response which is accurate, which is timely, which is complete, which is professional and courteous.
For every student it's different. So for a lot of students, I think university when they first start off is a big and scary place. For a lot of students they might not have any family members who have ever come to university, or for other students they're coming into a different environment where maybe none of their friends from school have come to this university and they might all be out at a different one. So I think the first thing that students really want is advice, and they want support and to know that if they do get into trouble that there's someone there to hold their hand and give them that advice and to help them through it, and that whilst we might be sitting in large lecture theatres with lots of other people who we don't really know, the university is there to support us when we need it most.
You are able to respond knowledgeably and helpfully to people's inquiries, but I see services going quite a lot beyond that, because I think it's quite important in a student centre that you can anticipate the needs that people have for information.
Which sometimes what the student actually needs is not what they're actually asking for.
In a way, we're the guide to people who, if you like, don't even know the questions that they need to ask.
Every university is notorious for having a number of different service provision areas all over campus, and what we're also notorious for is referring people, flicking them, sending them onto another service location. And sometimes that's inevitable, but we really need to be mindful of that and to prevent that, flicking mentality. Case in point, our determination here is that any student who's come to us with a question that really needs to be answered by another student centre shouldn't have to go to another student centre to get it answered.
Across the board, we service academic as well as personal, emotional, student services based needs for students. Not always easy to spot what the student is actually looking for. So in a way there's a little bit of interpreting of policy and a little bit of interpreting students' needs.
I think personalised is key, particularly when we're in this giant kind of institution.
Generally, in terms of MEOS, we are here for students and we're run by students, so we understand their point of view.
If I go to the student service and then they ask me to go online or ask me to go to somewhere else, I will get very disappointed and very frustrated.
I think being able to see each person as an individual and a different problem, rather than trying to sort of categorise problems and say I've done this before, this is the way we do it, is important.
Because there are so many students in the uni, everyone faces different issues, and then there are so many different services across the uni. Yeah.
Channeled to some other places, like, I have to refer you to this other place and this other place, and
Yeah.
you have to do a lot of stops in between in order to get to the person that you need to
Yeah.
speak to.
Can't possibly fulfill some requests where a customer might ordinarily say, no, the customer's right, this is what I demand, this is the service that I need. Because if it's to do with academic integrity, perhaps achieving all of the required hurdle requirements for a subject, or handing in all of the required assessment, equity issues, so not cheating on your exams, for example, in order to get through. There are a range of different responsibilities that we have to the academic integrity of the course, to the students building their knowledge base, and so it's not always as simple as just fulfilling a request for a student.
Maybe good service is something that everyone knows it's there. Like when I need help, I know it's there for me.
We are an educational institution where we have as our objective the provision of a high quality educational experience for our students.
Reminding ourselves that we're educators, every opportunity to speak with a student, regardless if it's about enrolling into one subject next semester, is an opportunity to mentor, to educate.
In my perspective, about making me feel like I'm at the best institution possible in the world is by providing for what I need.
Like us being an international students, we pay so much for our school fees, and also we tend to face more difficulties than other students, especially local students. So that means we as an international students, we might require more service from uni.
It's not like a normal customer that you're going to have limited number of transactions with.
Many students really appreciate to have someone that is prepared to sit and to actually listen to what they have to say, and to be able to suspend judgment for that period of time.
The university is about empowering the student.
Enabling students to find the information, the access to services, so that they can help themselves.
I think that it's really important for the staff in the customer service group to actually be responsive to these students, because we're doing a pretty serious course. Most of the time our needs are very specific to something and we need to get our answers answered very quickly.
I think it's really important that the person serving you would help you in a way that they would expect to be helped themselves if they were in the same situation, and also understanding your problem and being able to help you in the most efficient and easiest way possible.
So several of the stars of that film are in the room, and I'm sure they'd be happy to sign autographs if you ask them nicely. There were lots of interesting points made in that. It's a very rich collection of comments, I think. And I think it just really illustrates some of the paradoxes and some of the things that feel like tensions with which we work sometimes in the services space. Because as Andy's already noted, this is not, we're not producing white goods here, and it's not just a matter of if somebody doesn't like it, they bring it back and we give them another one. So one of the really big things for us is students as responsible adult learners. They are adults. I know we have some who are under 18, but they turn 18 fairly quickly, and then they become adults officially. So we're working with young people who need to take responsibility for their own decisions, and we need to help them do that. And so the line that we walk there is quite an interesting one at times. Sometimes because of our absolute wealth of experience and knowledge, and because we're professionals in the field, you know, we know what they should do, and negotiating around that and allowing students to make their own decisions, even if we think it might be not such a good one, and then working out what our role is in mopping that up if it goes pear-shaped is quite an interesting balance to strike. So that's part of the challenge and the excitement of working with this, which I think is also connected to our absolute explicit commitment to have, where appropriate, programs and initiatives that we work with led and initiated by students, and to give students the space to do that and the support to do that, because that plays to many of our goals for developing our students' capabilities in this space, and we have lots and lots of great examples of the work that students do. And I'm just thinking of some of the NUOS events that have been held recently that some of us were lucky enough to attend. Just amazing events that are extraordinarily well organised and well led. So we know that our students have that potential and that capacity. So our role in enabling that and standing back sometimes and not doing it ourselves is also an interesting one. I've worked in this space for a long time, and I've come to understand the enormous effort that goes into looking effortless. And it's something that we tend to undervalue, I suspect, because the better we do it, the less visible it is. And it looks like it just happens. And that's, of course, how we want it to look to our students and to our staff colleagues who use our services. They don't need to know how hard we're paddling under the water. But the corollary of that sometimes is that if we're that good we make it look completely effortless, then we and the people around us actually don't always appreciate the skill and expertise and effort that actually is required. And I've seen so many examples of not understanding it until the person who's been doing it so brilliantly steps away, and suddenly the wheels start to fall off, you know. So I think there's a challenge for us as professional staff in this space, is to be able to articulate that effort and to name it and to advocate for it where we need to do that, sometimes with our colleagues or you know, our own staff. Another feature of the work that we do, which is important to, I think, acknowledge, is that we have a sort of enrichment engagement piece that we do with our students, which, you know, is part of what energises us all about how fabulous it is to work with students. But we also have a really important administrative component to what we do. And we do this not because we're serial bureaucrats and we love doing administration. There are basically, in my view, two main reasons for administration. One is usually around a compliance agenda or a reporting agenda or something we have to be able to document for some authority that's given us money or whatever it might be. And the other dimension is equity. We do things, we have processes and administrative rules and so on for equity reasons, to make sure that resources are shared appropriately, that it's not just first in best dressed, that the people who trample to the front don't get a better deal than the ones who were better mannered and stayed at the back, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, in thinking about this, I've never come up with any other really good reason for doing administration. I think it kind of falls into those two main groups. So they're really important reasons, and there's a little bit of inclination in an academic institution to be a bit dismissive of administration sometimes, and to not value it for what it is, but also, you know, not see it as quite as much fun as some of the other things that we might be doing. And I think, you know, it's really important that we recognise the incredible value of both those dimensions of the work that we do. Another one of our ongoing challenges is our aspirations never meet the budget realities with which we work, and everybody I speak to at any university ever in the world would say the same thing. So we're never short of great ideas and things we could do, and we never have quite enough money to do all of them. The reality for us is that it's just not possible to meet all students' expectations all the time. I think Isabel touched on this in one of her Vox Pops moments. Because clearly what students are looking for, and it's a completely reasonable approach to take, is that kind of tailored, just for me, just in time, just enough approach. And we have 45,000 students roughly, and however many of us, and clearly, you know, that is kind of not possible to do in its purest sense. So what we need to do, and what we do every day, is make judgments all along the way about what is going to work best for the most number of people, and how are we going to get the best possible support to the most people. And, you know, inevitably that is not going to work for everybody to their satisfaction all the time, and that's an enormous tension for those of us who work in that space, because we're all here because we really want to do something that makes an impact for the good for every student that we deal with. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing this work. So that's what gets us out of bed in the morning, and to live with the notion that, you know, that's never going to be entirely possible for everybody is actually quite difficult, and I think causes us some collective subliminal stress sometimes. But I also think we have to be really realistic about that and understand that for what it is, and find our way through that and recognise that, you know, despite that, we still do some terrific things and can continue to think about how they can be improved. And the last thing I wanted to touch on in terms of some of the sort of paradoxes, which again Andy also gave us a great intro to, is this notion of the student as customer. And in many ways that doesn't seem like a particularly contentious proposition, but it's simplistic in our space, and I think it's important to understand that it's been really important for us to think about students as customers, as we continue to do, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But this slide just points to a little bit, there's been a great deal of writing and thinking done by many clever people about this whole notion, and there's lots of literature on it if you're looking for it. This just draws on some work of Jeff Sharrock, who's an academic here at this university, at the LH Martin Institute, who back in 2000 wrote an article on students as customers, which he republished this year in The Conversation. And he came up with this framework that proposed 4 sort of dimensions to students' relationship with us, of which student as customer is one, but not the only one. And I just find that quite helpful in thinking about this particular aspect of the work that we do. And he concluded that, you know, in asking the question, does it help to see students as customers? Because in many ways they're not, in some ways they are. And some of our academic colleagues would argue to the death about this. They're very offended by the notion of students as customers because it doesn't capture the way they think about their relationship with students, and that's quite understandable. So there was a wonderful play some years ago, some of you might remember, called Life After George, and George was an academic. This was written by Hanny Radisson. And George was an academic, and he was meeting with his dean, and he was railing with fury and saying, students aren't customers, they don't know what they want until they've heard from us, you know, it's just ridiculous to think about that. And I think that would capture how many of our colleagues probably still think about it, and that's not an irrational view at all. But from our perspective, I think it is quite helpful to think about that in a framework. And Jeff's conclusion was, it can help to think about students as customers if it means ensuring they'll be well advised, well supported, they can make informed choices, use their time well, and fully benefit from their studies. And I guess I wanted to drop that in as a sort of background to our thinking about, or our drawing on the business of customer service and how that's helped us think about our service commitment, because we have gone quite a bit into that space in the last couple of years. So, why did we do the service commitment work? A few reasons. We've had consistent feedback from students through instruments like the Melbourne Experience Survey and other things that you'd all be aware of that has certainly indicated there was room for improvement in our service delivery. So that was a really important starting point. We also had lots of anecdotal evidence about variable service practices across central services and across faculty, student centres and faculty offices as they were before we talked to student centres. And different ideas about what service is, as we've already touched on, played into that. We've also, I think, grown to understand how important good service is in a student's experience at the university. A student may not choose to come here because they hear we've got great student services per se. We know there are many other factors driving choice, but there's no doubt from the evidence that we have that what happens when they get here in the service space is really important to their experience of their whole time here, including their studies, and that we really do have an impact on that. And I think that has been something we've become a lot more aware of in the last 5 to 10 years. The introduction of our new curriculum model in 2008 had an explicit commitment to improving the quality of the student experience, so that was also a driver of this work. And related to that, it's part of an ongoing, the risk of sounding like an episode of MasterChef, an ongoing journey that we've been on to move from being a more provider-driven provider of services to one that is more explicitly student-focused. And I think we've made a lot of progress towards that goal. Are we there yet is the question. And in fact, where is there is also the question. So, some of the things that have happened in this space that we've been aware of. Shared commitment that is plastered around the walls and is there in the blue. That was negotiated with a number of people in this room and a number of others during 2011. We also implemented a contact centre. We engaged the Customer Service Benchmarking Australia people to benchmark with us starting in 2010. So we now have 4 years of data out of that. As I'm sure many of you know, they have alternately looked at face-to-face telephone and email interactions that we have with our students by pretending to be students and asking us a whole lot of questions. I've had lots of feedback from many of you about how appalling they are as actors and how easy it is to spot who they are, which is fine. And we have passed that on. But nonetheless, it's been a really interesting exercise to get the feedback from that. We've also set up this whole service commitment function that we have, of which Zane is our coordinator, and that involves offering training, these workshops that we offer, online resources that we have, networking opportunities such as this event, and ways of bringing you together to talk about good practice and to share your experiences and your war stories. And of course the wonderful Service Star Award, which I hope you're all aware of, which we roll out every month, and we seek nominations from you of colleagues who have been particularly great in the service space that we would like to recognise. So that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years. What have we learned? We've learned a few things, and we continue to, of course. Sometimes you need a leap of faith with this stuff. And this is an interesting proposition in a university that prides itself on planning and forecasting and putting endless numbers in boxes and generally having a very sort of metric-based approach to big decisions. But for something like setting up a contact centre, sometimes you just need to take a leap of faith and go, we think this is worth doing, let's have a look at it, which is exactly what happened in that case. It's extremely easy to underestimate the amount of time and effort it takes to do something like set up a contact centre. It was very complex. The negotiations were extraordinary to set up things like referral protocols, agreed service behaviours between multiple service touchpoints that you all work with and work with our students. And that is an ongoing conversation that we have. It's not particularly finished, but there was an enormous amount of work at the beginning done to understand the very complex landscape that we have here at the Student Services. Involving our own students has been absolutely key to the success of what we've been able to do. We piloted the Students at Work initiative initially through setting up the contact centre, and I'll come back to that, but that's been incredibly important in both providing opportunities for students to work in some of these sorts of spaces, but also for us to hear from our students about how we should be thinking about some of these things and informing our own understanding of some of the issues that affect students. The other thing that has been really helpful has been bringing in some key people from outside the university who have really strong customer service experience and skills to help us think about this. So while we certainly have quite a bit of our own expertise, it's been really brilliant to combine that with some outside input, as it were. And really we couldn't do one without the other. They've both been incredibly important. The leadership and the visibility of this agenda has been really important. There's nothing like putting a few CSBA targets into the Dean's KPIs to get a bit of, traction, and sometimes that's what you need to do in an institution like this, or any institution, in terms of getting that kind of commitment to and attention on the whole issue of service and how we're doing. Every time we get a CSBA report which tells us about things like how we went in our greeting skills, or whether there were enough pens in the container on the counter, or the brochures were neat and tidy, there's always a bit of a chuckle about, really, do we really think that's such a big deal? I mean, do students really care if there's 3 pens or 5 pens? I would just make the point that sometimes things that seem trivial are not, and the example I like to give is around name badges, and I'm thrilled to see you all wearing your name badges today, so that's a good start. But back in the day, and my colleagues in education might remember this, back in my faculty office days, I had a group of staff on the front counter. They were all bright young graduates of this university, and we made the radical suggestion that they should wear name tags because they were talking to students across the counter, and there was just about a revolution. They were so offended by this notion. And one of them said to me, "I'm not a checkout chick. I'm not wearing a name badge." And I thought, well, that's a really interesting response, not the one I was expecting. And so we drilled into that a bit more, and it just became clear that these particular staff didn't want to talk to students. They were actually actively trying not to. So when we looked at the counter, there were sort of partitions being put up, and they were doing everything they could do to not talk to students, to do their real work, which was something else, which I never quite got to comment on. So in the end, we realised fairly quickly that these were not the right people for this job, and that they shouldn't be anywhere near students. And happily, they all found opportunities elsewhere, and I'm sure they're leading very full and happy lives since. But they were absolutely in the wrong role. And so the point of that story is that the name badge seemed trivial, but was actually very important in signifying something that was not working well for us at that time. And I don't think I would have a conversation like that now, I'm happy to say. So, what might we think are the outcomes from the work that we've done on service commitment so far? So, the CSBA data has been really interesting. As I said, we've now got 4 years of it, and what that's told us is, as I said, it measures things like greeting skills, inquiry resolution, communication, interpersonal, so on and so on. And we have certainly got some key improvements that have been measured over time. So we've got dramatically improved wait times. The gap between the highest performing and the lowest performing services, which was quite large the first time we did it, has almost disappeared. So everybody's lifted, and it's now quite a tight grouping. So that's really encouraging, and we've talked to particular student centres and central services at length about some of the things that they did to improve their performance. Many lower incidences now of what CSBA certainly rates as unacceptable behaviour, variously described as laid back and easygoing, which I struggled with a bit because I didn't know that was totally unacceptable. But certainly disinterested and curt is not where we want that. And best practice is interested, warm and helpful. So that's what we're shooting for, and we've got lots going on in that quadrant, so that's all good. So definitely an improvement overall, and some areas have lifted markedly, so that's been really pleasing. We have some way to go before we top the GO8 list of universities, CSBA benchmarks across the GO8 universities in Australia, and we're actually sitting at about the middle, so we're not as great as we would like to be. So, room for improvement and not for complacency. But some of the other things that have flown from this service commitment work that we're really proud of are things like the Students at Work program, which is now fully established in our Careers and Employment team, and that has been a great source of pride to many of us. Certainly some growing engagement with other parts of the university beyond student services, so we've been talking with the library and ITS and Ibis Sport about some of these service commitment issues and the work that we've done. And I think it's really supported and enabled some of the other key agendas we have for student services around enabling student self-service and our developmental student advising agenda. So I think this has really been an important plank of that work. And I guess my final observation would be it's given us, to some extent, a common language to talk about some of these things in a more shared way than I think we had before. And there's no doubt that we all take this work seriously now. And whatever we might do about, however many eyes we might roll about some of the CSBA stuff, which seems a bit clunky and the mystery shoppers are really annoying, we actually are really interested and engaged with the output of those processes. And it really has helped us have conversations around these things and to understand how we might all improve. And I think that's been really valuable. And the evidence suggests that we are certainly taking this seriously. So that's all very exciting. And for the last word on the subject, we're going to hear from some of our students. Our wonderful student intern, Cameron, who's filming today, when I was doing this presentation earlier in the year, we asked Cameron and a couple of his colleagues to think about the service commitment work, and this is what he did.
Hi, I want to talk to someone about getting an extension on my assignment. See, last weekend...
have you filled out a subject extension?
No. Where do I go with those?
Just in the rack over there.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
You'll need to fill that out before you come back.
Alright.
Next, 34, please.
Hi. I'm having trouble enrolling in a subject.
Yes.
It's telling me I don't have the prerequisite.
What would you like me to do about that?
Sorry to interrupt, mate. I can't find.
Sorry, you're gonna have to take a number like everyone else.
I was just here.
Yeah, one number, one transaction.
You know, I wonder what it would be like if you knew what it was like to be a student. If you know what matters to me. Do you know which prerequisites you're missing? I think it's chemistry. Oh, okay. Did you study chemistry in high school? Yeah. Wonderful. I'll waive that prerequisite for you now.
Hi, sorry. I can't find the form over there.
It's the one in the bottom right-hand corner. It's a green form.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, that prerequisite has been waived for you. You should now be able to enroll in your subject. Thanks. You're welcome. Have a nice day.
Be approved by your tutor, followed by the lecturer's PA, and then his dog, and then finally the lecturer himself.
Well, how long will that take?
Up to 3 weeks, more in peak periods.
Right. Thanks.
Yep.
So, thank you to Cameron, Kyle and Sam for that piece for us. Look, one of the reasons I love that piece of film is I think it just really reminds us what a privilege it is to work with students, despite the challenges that we face at times, and to share the sense of possibility that a university education brings. And I think that's what we all subscribe to.